So, one brilliant scene, huh? I actually had a few ideas for this one. There's a lot of great 13 moments in the comics that I've been reading lately. One from Hidden Human History stood out to me in particular. Running away, still being a choice. It feels very appropriate for a Doctor for the 2020s. The ending of Mistress of Chaos would also, I think, have been a solid pick, as well as some moments in Redacted. I was even originally going to do the regeneration scene itself. Just a collection of scenes that, once everything is quietened down a bit, it's just the right blend of hedonism and childishness that really made me appreciate what others see in her. But then... Hey, Ben, have you met the room's newest elephant? Her name is Thasmin! 13's best moments is something I've been thinking of quite a bit lately in regards to the other big project I'm working on this November. Coming this time next week, if I'm not dead. So I'm going to talk about a scene from an episode I'm probably not going to mention in that particular video. Revolution of the Daleks is an episode I seem to be in the minority as liking. Daleks as cops is just an idea that I think is too good for maybe any episode. But it's probably my favourite of Chris Chibnall's Dalek stories. The fallout of a Doctor arriving months too late, it's not a new beat by any means, but I actually think this is my favourite take on it. My pick is the departure of Ryan and Graham. Not an especially deep scene, but it just works. It's such an obvious way to handle the characters, and when I say obvious, I actually mean that as a compliment. It's just a moment where the audience on the show are completely on the same page. We've seen from Can You Hear Me that Ryan wants to be there for his friends. Of all the characters, he's probably the most invested in his life here on Earth. I buy that he wants to spend more time here, with his dad especially. So I'm just going to be upfront. I'm mainly going to be using this video as an excuse to sing the praises of Tosin Cole. I've got to disagree with even some well-intentioned folk who've had issues with his performance, because I think he's great. He brings his A-game to the character drama, and honestly, when you give him the material, he's funnier than Walsh.
Ooh, what's up? What's up?
I shall return with my pistol.
He's getting a gun, he's getting a gun, he's getting a gun.
I just find the vibe that he can bring really refreshing. You know, a companion who doesn't always want to be there, who's kind of rolling his eyes at it at times. It actually helps on quite a few 13 stories. So when the Doctor returns, Ryan really seems to be giving off a sense of, oh, this again? He's been down this road before with his dad.
Yeah, well, it's done now, so...
This sense of disappointment is just familiar to him. He's barely bothered to be upset by this point. And Cole sells this negative acceptance naturally and effortlessly. The interactions with him and 13 this whole episode, they really are leaning into the absentee mum who's all sad smiles and attempts to get her kid to open up. And you don't even have to buy that they have that kind of relationship for this to work. In fact, I'd say it works even better when you read it as Ryan and 13 not really having a one-on-one relationship. It's like they're realizing for the first time, because they've been apart, that they never really had much of a bond in the first place.
You do love a beanie? Me too. One of the first things I noticed about you that night we met, I thought not everyone can carry off a yellow beanie. There's a lad to rely on.
Moving on to Graham, I've seen his exit have a bit more criticism, but I honestly think his motive is pretty well demonstrated by the episode.
You know, I'll always be looking around then to say stuff to you, you know?
Note that he was ready to go on another adventure right before Ryan announced he wanted to leave. The appeal of travelling in the TARDIS for him is spending time with Ryan. Talking to him, making him cringe. That's what he got out of it. You know, I was shocked revisiting this at just how well it works. This is a low-key departure. It's not going for a Doomsday or an Angels Take Manhattan, but that's not an inadequacy here. The score is incredible. It's just the right amount of hugs, the right amount of tears, the right amount of little jokes. Each actor's just tuned their performance just right for the level this should be at. This is the fam finally firing on all fronts, tragically at the last minute. Even stuff I should be rolling my eyes at, like Graham calling back to the time in Arachnids when 13 said they'd come back as different people. Sure, when we think of Ace or Martha, we might scoff at applying that description to Ryan and Graham, but it's applied quite simplistically. When they left, they were people who wanted to travel, and they've come back as people who now don't want to leave. I also find 13 interesting here. She holds herself together pretty well when Ryan announces he's leaving, and even Graham, but this group hug.
Bye, fam.
She's saying goodbye to the family, not really Ryan and Graham, which is an interesting distinction, and the way Whittaker plays 13, kinda shaken, suggesting changing time, and then it just cuts away from that. Her and Yaz don't really get closure here, and it does lead into the idea that this was somewhat of the impetus for her to go looking for answers in Flux, to try and find some lead on a family that she might have had before. In fact, this episode seems to parallel her arc with Ryan's, which is kind of interesting. I didn't even notice until a rewatch that he was actually the one to suggest that she go looking for answers once she was done with the Daleks here. My one criticism of this departure, I think given the thematic content of Can You Hear Me, and this episode in particular, I think Fight for My Planet should probably have been referring to something like Extinction Rebellion or Black Lives Matter rather than...
Some weird stuff going on in the village in Finland. Troll invasion, so the locals are saying.
And you know there's a quarry in Korea that shut down because the workers are reporting they saw gravel creatures come to life.
Giga's blog, as always, has gone into great detail on this. That entry remains my favourite of his. Though I will say, there's a criticism of the companions here that they were unable to do anything without 13, but to be fair to them, they did have a plan, they just didn't have the Doctor's resources. So them getting the psychic papers does feel like a payoff to that at least. It's keeping in touch with the ideas that not much separates the Doctor and the companions. So I'm using one brilliant scene to plant this flag. I'm coming out as a Ryan Sinclair stan. I can safely say by this point that he's my favourite companion of 13's. And whilst the handling of his dyspraxia has been met with a lot of justified criticism, I do find myself relating to his outbursts of frustration and anger when they come up. It's something I can run into all the time when managing my autism and my ADHD. Like with the 11th Doctor, it's completely unintentional, but it's a connection I can't help making with this character. So, speaking only for myself, I really like where this moment leaves him. This final shot in particular. He's exactly where he was at the start of the show. He's still falling off his bike, but he's made his peace with it. His dyspraxia wasn't an arc. It wasn't something he had to conquer. It's just a part of himself that doesn't frustrate him so much anymore. Learning how to ride a bike whilst trying to save the world. It's a nice image, and it's very Doctor Who.
Go on, Ryan. Yeah. Go on, son. You're doing it, mate.
Thank you so much for watching, guys. As always, please do yourself a favour and check out all the other videos involved in this project. And while you're at it, go check out an awful lot of Runnings episode on the defining 13 moments. And come back next week while me and some good friends of mine talk about the best 13 stories across all mediums. Happy Doctor Who Day. Wait, shit, I forgot to talk about the Grace cameo!